Morning everyone, welcome to my studio. Back to acrylic again for those of you who are working with acrylic, and the majority of you do. The exercise this morning is to do a quick one, so no more than about maybe 10-15 minutes on here. Rather than sit down and spend hours doing a finished painting, experimenting is often the key to a lot of this. The more experimenting you do, the more chances you take, the better you become. So no more than 10-15 minutes. Yes, it's a familiar subject, the teapot and the cup. So the first thing to appreciate is keep it simple. Don't make it complicated. That way you can concentrate on the main part of the exercise, applying paint. If we had a more complex image here, then a lot of your time will be devoted to working this out, working that out, and getting things and so forth. But no, this is about application of paint and also enjoying the process. So hopefully when I make a start, you'll see what I mean. I'm working here on the back of a piece of watercolour paper. It could well be lining paper, just something to work on. I've got it just taped down with masking tape. And in a moment I'll show you the materials. Because I said I'm going to keep it simple, I'm only going to be using, well, 3 colours plus white. So once again, it takes away some of the complexity of it, and so I can concentrate on the main part of the exercise, applying the paint, being brave, being spontaneous, following instinct. Okay, so I'll show you the materials and I'll show you the subject as well. I know you're familiar with this, overly familiar, some of you, but for the reasons that I stated. Okay, let's have a look. Okay, here's the subject, blue teapot, blue teacup, and I'm going to keep everything simple. Next I'll show you the materials. I'm going to be using, well, 4 colours, well, 3 plus the white. Ultramarine blue, cerulean blue, crimson alizarin. I can combine the ultramarine blue with the crimson alizarin and make a shadow. Plus white. Got my palette ready. Yes, with greaseproof paper over it. Palette knife for doing the mixing in a few moments. And again, just 3 brushes, probably in number 8. That was a number 11 actually. Probably number 6, and then of course a rounded brush to do a little more detail. So once again, keep things simple. 3 brushes and a jar of water. Don't forget the spray to keep the acrylics moist, and away we go. And so to the mixing. Get into the habit of putting unique colours around the edges and do the mixing in the middle. I'll mix up perhaps both a mid and a light version of the ultramarine blue. Let's see how we get on. I know normally we put the darker into the light. I'm just doing it a little bit this way. Quite a nice light ultramarine blue. Maybe one just slightly darker. So I've got 3 values here, a light, a mid, and of course straight from the tube itself. And then of course I can also make adjustments to the tonal values as we go along. Cerulean blue. I suspect I'm going to put cerulean blue, or a lighter version, into the background, as I'll explain once I start the painting. Finally, ultramarine and alizarin. It's one of the, or 2 colours that I use to make shadow. There are other colours you can mix to get shadows, but this is one of my favourites. Ultramarine blue, alizarin red, mixed together, modified with white, will give you violet. So again, you don't have to go out and buy violet. And then you can just mix according to your own taste. And we are set to go. You can see why you need a large palette. Even this is a touch on the small size. You run out of space very quickly, so the bigger the palette, the better. Also, because it's usually warm in my studio, you need to keep the paint moist, hence a spray from time to time, and away we go. The most daunting part of starting a painting is that, making a start. It can be quite threatening, you know, as I said a moment ago, quite daunting. Where do you start, what do you do, and so forth. So to keep it simple, start with the blocking in. Most artists do start with blocking in. There is no point trying to get the lid of the pot perfect before you move on to the handle and so forth. Getting the pot what you think is finished and then moving on to the cup. No, you work on the whole thing. So I'm going to make an initial start, working quite quickly, and you soon get into it, but this is perhaps the most apprehensive part of the process, making this initial start. So without further ado, I'll start with the teapot. I'm using the big brush. I've got my colours ready, and remember the brush strokes follow the actual shape of the item. So I won't be painting flat here. I'll be imagining I'm stroking the brush around the three-dimensional object. Okay, so away I go. I'll start blocking in with a mid-tone, and there we go. So once again, I'm not trying to recreate the colours that are in front of me. As I said earlier, the purpose of this exercise is to enjoy the process, work quite quickly, and no more than 10-15 minutes. So I've got to keep an eye on the clock. And from time to time I'm looking at the subject, which is just a meter. The paint at this point goes on quite thin. Then I can think of the texture later on. Alright, yes, I do need to give some attention to the dark. The light is coming from the left, so therefore, although on the subject itself, it's coming from the opposite direction. So I've got to make a decision here. No, I'll stick with what I usually do. Light coming from the left. If I wanted to, I could smooth the paint out at this point. So if I go now to the darker tone, this is neat. And while that paint is still wet, I can get some smooth transitions. Before I move on, I'll just come back. I'll just lighten a little bit here, especially because the light, remember, is coming from the left hand side. And of course, this is the advantage of using acrylic, we can overpaint. If I had a mind to, I could smooth that even more, but I'll leave it. And that's sufficient for the pot, because as you can probably appreciate, with all this whiteness here, it's very difficult to make further adjustments here. So I'm going to come now and move on to the cup. I haven't used any of the cerulean blue yet, so I'll stick with the lightish tone for the cup. There we go. And that's going to be dark in there because the light is coming from the left, so I can put in that light here. You see here where you can see the paper glowing through. I rather like that on a painting, so you don't have to cover every little millimetre of the paper rather, because the light is coming from the left, so I can develop the colour. This is the mid-tone here, by the way. Now it's dark in there because the light is coming from the left, so that's on the inside of the cup. I got a dark area there. I can pick up the underside of the handle. You see what happens now? Because I got a dark area here, that sort of then makes me pick out some of the dark areas further here. I'm still blocking in. When you block in, put the paint in thinly, and you've only got two things to consider really. One is the colour, secondly of course tonal value. The other thing we have to consider now is the background. The background isn't playing an important role here, but I need to consider it, don't I? There's an awful lot of whiteness there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this very light cerulean blue and to take some of the whiteness off the background. I don't need to take it to the four corners, so without further ado I better just give it a spray to loosen it up a little bit and spread it, because it can get tacky quite quickly. And then very quickly, again, I don't need to be precious in order to get it. I can come back in and reinstate things. Now at this point the tension or your apprehension starts to disappear, because now you can see, you've got a better idea what's happening in the painting. So, and then you follow now, as I say, a lot of instinct, going wherever the eye takes you, enjoying it, work quickly. I've got to keep reminding myself I've only got 15 minutes to do this. Now you can see already how different the painting is because of what I've done with the background, or indeed with the foreground. The items now aren't so overwhelming. At this point it's looking very abstract, or semi-abstract. In a moment I can come back in now and start to work on the main elements again. So I'll come back to the pot, look now more carefully at the tonal values. As I said a moment ago, I'm working a little bit off the top of my head because the light in actual fact is coming from the right hand side. But not to worry, it's good that you're able to work off the top of your head, as it were. What we do not want to do here is produce a copy. Often we work from photographs, as you know, and it's very easy just to end up with a photographic version, which we're not about. Then my eye comes over to here. Again, I'm using now the neat ultramarine blue. Go into there. And really I've made quite an interesting start on here. I'd better start looking at some of the lighter values. The mid-tone, let's have a look at the mid-tone. So I'll go for a light. Now I can come for a light here, on top of the pot, or the lid rather. Pick up the lid again. So it's now blocked in. Now I can stand back if need be. And by the way, I'm using long brushes, and I hold those about 3/4 of the way. So it may appear that I'm working here, but I'm not. I'm trying to work, well, I do work arm's length. The further you are back from the subject, the better the assessments you can make. Let's bring out the handle a little bit. Now I can look at some of the darker values. Also, I'm going to use the corner of the brush here to pick out perhaps the lid. And then how's that looking? So it's blocked in, but you can see how the brush strokes, I haven't thinned anything out there, I've just gone for it. So there's quite a bit of movement I've achieved here with those quick sharp brush strokes. Now I can start to pick out some of the finer detail. So I'm using the round brush. Again, looking at the pot. Yes, we got the on the top. Now I gave myself, didn't I, 10 no more than 15 minutes. So once again I'm going back where the eye takes me. There's a tooth on this paper. That's the reason why the paint doesn't cover every nook and cranny, as it were, which is good, even though that's not on the subject. So as I keep reminding you, I'm not about trying to capture a photographic version. I could probably now bring this painting quickly to a conclusion, couldn't I? So the only other thing I need to consider are some lights, some lighter values, and if I wanted to, I could put the paint on more thickly as well. So I picked up a smaller brush, a smaller one, and let's go then to pick out some and I'm working again off the top of my head. I'm not trying to follow the lighting that I see in front of me. This is a very instinctive process. Very expressionistic. You can see how I seem to favour short brush strokes there. If I go for the round one again, I can pick out a bit more carefully, particularly the rim. There we go. And maybe the top of the... Oh yes, you see how very quickly I put those two in those brush strokes. I know it looks easy, but I couldn't do this for a long time. It takes a lot of practice to work with the confidence that I'm doing here. It does take a lot of practice. Now, I'm just going to put some shadow in there, and I think I'll probably leave it at that because I've achieved what I set out to do, is to encourage you to work quickly in a more spontaneous, instinctive approach. So there we go with the shadow. This is the violet I mixed up. Then of course we come to the teapot. And I could fiddle with this a little bit more. Here, for example, if I take a dollop of ultramarine blue, because I've got it on my palette and go to waste. You may not see how thickly I put that on, but it's a lovely contrast between there and there. Maybe I'll repeat it here, 2 areas. Maybe then here. Rather than throw the paint away, just into there. So I'm looking a little bit now at the texture of the paint, putting it on more thickly. Now I'm going to leave this, otherwise I'll be tweaking it just for the sake of tweaking it, okay? And I think I'm going to leave this now. Thanks for watching. So try to remind yourself the purpose of this exercise. Not to create a photographic version of what's in front of you, but to enjoy the process. You can see how quickly I worked here, and I've probably done this in 10, no more than 15 minutes. I'm going to leave this in a moment. Finished. Yes, and I remembered to put a frame around it, which sets it off quite nicely. I'm pleased with that, and I enjoy doing it. I've not managed to do a lot of painting over the last 10, 13 days because I've had to deal with other issues. But it's great to get back into it again and just to enjoy it. So do have a go. The next subject we'll tackle will be a landscape. It'll be a similar approach, again keeping it simple. And I hope you do learn a few of the lessons I tried to convey here today. And as I said, the next one we'll do will be a landscape. So happy painting, keep working away. It's a frustrating process at times, but hopefully this will encourage you to have a go, and then you can send me the results. Okay, bye for now.